Welcome to a smartphone that is about to smash a whole load of records. This is the successor to the Asus ROG Phone, which when it came out last year was labelled as ridiculous and crazy, and yet they have just completely topped it. Alright, so it actually took me a good minute to figure out which way this thing opens up, and once you're inside, it is equally elaborate. You get the company's 2nd gen Aeroactive cooler, which cools not just the phone, but also your fingers while playing. And get this, it gives you a second headphone jack. There's a pretty different looking plastic case here, and also a 30-watt adapter with a USB-C to USB-C cable. What is nice is they've also given replacement covers for your USB-C port, as well as a little add-on that turns your cooler into a phone stand as well. Okay, so the phone itself has 5 pillars, 5 key areas in which it's really doing something completely new. But just before we get to that, you might be thinking that phone looks chunky. It seems like pretty much the entire strategy of this device could be embodied with the word extreme, and that also applies to the dimensions. We're talking 9.78mm thick, with a mass of 240 grams. I don't think I've ever tested a phone that's heavier, aside from those crazy devices with 10,000 mAh batteries inside. I would say this, the weight itself is not a complete deal breaker for me, and I did find that the phone is still grippable thanks to a curved side trim, but also that the center of gravity here is just a little high up, so you've always just got to make sure you hold it properly. The design is just as nuts as last year. It pretty much looks like the company started with the original ROG phone and thought, how can we make this more? So, this phone is not just much larger, but it adds a second LED, a better ultra-wide camera, and the rear fingerprint scanner has now been replaced for an in-display one on the front. Here's what I think about it. The ROG Phone 2 looks spectacular when light hits the back. It forms streaks that run down the device and creates a rainbow effect when it hits any of these accents. But it does lose a lot of that magic when you're not in favourable lighting, and the finish does absolutely nothing to mask fingerprints. Massive shout out to the case though. The finish contrasts well with the smooth glass, and although it does look a little bit like your phone is wearing a helmet, it does manage to reduce the fingerprint problem without obstructing the view of the design. Now, you might have guessed, the first pillar here is performance. This is pretty much the fastest phone in the world. We've got the brand new Snapdragon 855 Plus chip, which compared to the already powerful 855 adds a pretty negligible 4% CPU overclock, but more importantly, a large 15% GPU overclock. It then pairs that with 12 gigs of RAM and 500 gigs of super fast UFS 3 storage. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If a company is going to pitch a phone as a high-end gaming device, and they're going to charge a premium for it, then the top priority needs to be that it actually performs better for gaming. And so, thankfully, that is not an issue here. I won't show any benchmark scores yet, as this thing is on beta software, but you can probably imagine what they'd be. It's also got an upgraded heat dissipation system, which you kinda need when you're using an overclocked chip like this. Okay, so the second pillar is battery, and this actually goes quite a way towards explaining how this thing ended up being this much of a unit. The ROG Phone 2 packs a 6,000 mAh battery, which is completely unheard of, and if you're conservative with it, we're talking the kind of battery that can get you into your 3rd day of usage. But also bear in mind that this phone in particular has the ability to drain battery quickly. You've got a 120Hz display, an overclocked chip, and potentially this extra cooler as well, all of which need to be powered. You also get pretty fast 25-watt charging. It's actually a 30-watt charger in the box, but 5 of those watts are reserved for charging the phone's peripherals, which are coming soon, so do subscribe if you want to see some of that action. There's one thing I've got to say I agree with Asus on when it comes to this phone, and that is prioritizing a higher capacity battery as opposed to one with a higher charging wattage. You might know that when you charge your phone, the rate of charging falls as the battery starts to get full. And so, if you have a higher capacity battery, let's say the 6,000 mAh one in this phone, then even though it might take longer to fully charge the phone, you can still get to 4,000 mAh faster than an equivalent device that had a 4,000 mAh battery, because that would slow down towards the end. The third pillar is display. It is very good, but I should start by mentioning 2 obvious caveats. It's still got some noticeable bezel around it, and it maxes out at 1080p. But these things are kind of subjective. Some people actually like larger bezels, it gives you something to grip on, and can result in better front-firing speakers, which, by the way, is definitely something you can see happening here. We've actually got a dual front-firing speaker system, and this is some of the best audio you can get on a smartphone. No doubt. And then as for it being a 1080p panel, I'm all for it. It's still crisp, and compared to a Quad HD panel, it's still going to preserve battery when gaming and keep frame rates higher. But if you are intent on finding the sharpest display out there, then this isn't going to be it. With that out the way though, wow. You're looking at world's first 120Hz AMOLED HDR smartphone display. It's got a record-breaking 1 millisecond response time, and while that's pretty hard to test in practice, I can say that this is easily one of the most fluid, tactile, and instantaneous experiences out there. It's not quite as bright, and contrast not as high as Samsung's best, but color accuracy is bang on. Number 4 is software. Straight out of the box, you can feel the refinement. In fact, this might just be the only time ever where I felt the need to show you guys the phone's setup screen. You get this super polished gaming portal that lets you see your phone's status at a glance. You can launch your favorite games and fine-tune LED behavior. It's all really impressive stuff. It even lets you block certain areas of your screen from responding to touches and gives you fine control over your CPU speeds. The ROG Phone 2 also sees the return of something called X Mode, which as a fun little touch makes your wallpaper and logos start to glow, but is really about upping the frequency of your CPU and blocking RAM-eating applications. Okay, so this software is Zen UI 6, and it is pretty bloatware-free. And while I'm still not a fan of the general gamer aesthetic, Asus is also going to be giving you the option to use that cleaner skin that we saw on the Zenfone 6. Okay, number 5. It's not a secret that the ROG Phone 2 is a gaming-first phone, and so it's nice to see some actually useful gaming features. The phone has clearly been designed with landscape use in mind, with this second side-mounted USB-C port for charging while playing, and these completely new capacitive air triggers that now support not just the tap functionality, but also the ability to slide and perform a completely different action. Oh yeah, and the phone also responds to just being squeezed, so you could configure a single squeeze to do one thing, and then a long squeeze to open up X Mode. And to add to all of this, the haptics on the phone are amazing, which of course aids in gaming to add tactility, but also just generally in typing. You get a really satisfying physical response to touches. So those are my 5 pillars, the 5 potential reasons why I think people might consider this phone, but there's a couple more things I need to mention. You've got those cameras, and whilst I wouldn't class them as a selling point exactly, this is a solid mid-range setup. You're pretty much getting the same cameras as you did on the super well-received Zenfone 6, although just without that rotating module. There's a main wide angle, there's an ultra wide, and there's also a software-based 2x zoom, which works well enough in broad daylight. The HDR Plus enhanced mode is an improvement, but dynamic range still doesn't match up to the best phone cameras out there. Shots are comparable in most conditions, but you'll be able to tell the difference when you try something more demanding. The phone even has a decent night mode. It can shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second, and it does slow motion. This is a capable camera setup, especially for a gaming phone. So there you have it, and let me tell you, I came this close to switching from the Galaxy S10 5G to the ROG Phone 2 as my main daily device. I love the idea of a 6000 mAh battery, of having the most powerful and fluid phone out there, but for me, a big part of it is cameras. The ROG Phone 2 is an insane gaming smartphone with pretty good cameras, and so because photography is such a priority for me, I couldn't quite justify it. But the fact that it was such a close call is a testament to how compelling this phone is. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to drop a link to a whole bunch of interesting smartphone unboxings like this one. And with that being said, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you